It was my 29th birthday, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cheap bottle of wine and a printout from a debt collector. The wine was the only thing making the situation tolerable, because the piece of paper in my hand claimed I owed $8,600 to a payday loan company I'd never heard of. I had just checked my credit score, expecting to see the excellent rating I'd worked 10 years for. Instead, my score had plummeted by nearly 200 points, turning my flawless financial history into a train wreck. The shock was instant, but the dawning, sickening certainty that followed was worse. I didn't need to check the borrower's name or address. I knew with a cold clench in my gut exactly who was responsible. It was Sarah, my own sister, and I'll never forget the casual way she destroyed my life, only for me to accidentally return the favor 10 times over. Hello, I'm Lena, and this is the story of how my little sister's betrayal over a handful of credit cards ended up exposing her entire web of lies to the one person she desperately needed to keep them from. I know many of you are listening while multitasking, maybe folding laundry or commuting home. Please take a moment to drop a comment and tell me where you are listening from. It helps me connect with you. Sarah was always the dramatic one, the one who lived larger than her means. For years, I'd been quietly covering her smaller financial messes, $100 here, $200 there. But this was different. This wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate act of identity theft.
She hadn't just used my name. She had changed her address to a P.O. box, used my social security number, and even managed to clone my driver's license for verification on several different loan applications. She was smart, careful, and utterly ruthless. When I finally confronted her, she didn't deny it. She just cried a performative, dramatic show of tears and mumbled something about being desperate. "It was just a few loans, Lena. I was going to pay it back," she wailed, standing in the foyer of her gorgeous over-the-top condo. The condo was the key to the whole facade. Sarah had recently become engaged to Marcus, a man who was not just wealthy but filthy rich. Marcus owned a national chain of high-end car dealerships and spoke about money in terms of millions, not thousands. Sarah had cultivated this image of herself as an effortlessly chic, slightly eccentric fashion buyer with a trust fund. She was supposed to be walking down the aisle in 2 months, securing the life she'd always craved. My conflict wasn't just about the debt, it was about family. Could I really send my own sister to jail? Could I ruin our mother's life by pressing criminal charges? I decided I couldn't. The trauma would be too great. But I also couldn't just absorb $10,000 of debt and let my credit score rot. My rage settled into a cold, clinical decision for vengeance without conviction. I wouldn't call the police. I would call the credit bureaus. The process of filing a fraudulent reporting claim is incredibly meticulous, and I approached it like a detective. I started with the 3 major credit agencies.
When you file a claim for identity theft, you don't just dispute the debt. You are essentially stating under penalty of perjury that you did not open the accounts and that the activity is fraudulent. Crucially, the credit bureau's investigation doesn't stop at the debt. They investigate the entire history tied to the fraudulent social security number. I hired a specialized financial lawyer for a fixed fee of $1,500. He advised me to file a credit report suppression claim. This was a nuclear option. It didn't just clear the fraudulent debts, it flagged my entire credit file as compromised and forced all creditors to re-verify every single transaction. This is where my quiet act of self-preservation began its slow-motion transformation into a catastrophe for Sarah.
The lawyers and the credit bureaus started sending out mass inquiries to every entity that had reported on my social security number in the past 5 years. The investigation began to reveal a much deeper web of lies than I had initially grasped. It wasn't just the $8,600. The credit inquiries started flagging 6 other accounts, including 3 store credit cards opened at luxury boutiques she couldn't afford, and a $20,000 auto loan for a car she drove that was officially registered in my name. The total liability under my social security number was over $35,000. But the real escalation, the microhook that pulled the thread on Sarah's entire life, came from an unexpected place. The mortgage lender. Sarah and Marcus were in the final stages of closing on a $6 million mansion. To qualify for the loan, Sarah had to prove her assets and creditworthiness, to inflate her assets and cover up her existing debt problems, which were already substantial before she dipped into my identity. She had created a massive, separate, fraudulent scheme. She had lied on her mortgage application, The credit suppression I filed with the bureaus sent a red flag directly to the mortgage lender because they had just recently pulled my, or rather, Sarah, using my social security number during their final verification checks. The system flagged the number as pending criminal fraud investigation, even though I had only filed a civil claim. The system doesn't distinguish the two. Then my phone rang. It wasn't my lawyer. It was Marcus. His voice wasn't angry. It was deadly calm. "Lena, what is going on with your social security number?" "My bank's fraud department just called me.
They said there is an active financial crimes investigation tied to a large mortgage application in Sarah's name." I didn't have to lie. I simply told him the truth. "Marcus, I didn't press charges against Sarah for using my identity. I just filed a civil claim to clear my name. The credit bureaus are doing their job. The sheer weight of the $35,000 in debt under my name, coupled with the massive mortgage fraud she had engineered under hers, was too much for the already fragile background check." Marcus had already been suspicious of Sarah's constantly changing stories and her extreme secrecy around her finances. My simple, truthful statement about the fraudulent reporting claim gave him all the evidence he needed. He started asking his own questions, using his vast resources to pull the full financial picture.
The final confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened very publicly. At the upscale, elaborate engagement party Sarah threw for herself and Marcus. I was standing near the champagne fountain when Marcus walked in. He didn't look at Sarah, who was beaming in a dress that cost more than my annual salary. He walked directly to his father, a renowned industrialist, and spoke loudly enough for the entire ballroom to fall silent. "Father," Marcus said, his voice ringing with cold finality, "I've canceled the wedding. The engagement is off." The silence was deafening. Sarah rushed over, her face a mask of panicked confusion. "What are you doing, Marcus? What is this?" Marcus didn't touch her. He simply pulled a stack of documents from his jacket pocket.
It was the complete, undeniable printout of the credit bureau investigation, the one that revealed the auto loan, the store cards, the $8,000 payday loan, and the initial report that flagged her for massive mortgage application fraud. "I don't marry a woman who has stolen from her own sister and lied to me about every aspect of her life," he stated, his eyes locking onto mine for a brief moment of acknowledgement. "The credit bureaus did their job, Sarah, and they told me everything your sister wouldn't. The public exposure was complete." Sarah's carefully constructed world, her engagement, her financial security, her reputation imploded in a single, devastating moment. She didn't lose the life she had, she lost the life she was about to secure.
The entire scheme, built on my identity and her elaborate deceit, was exposed to the one man whose wealth and reputation could not tolerate a lie. I walked away from the party quietly, my credit report already beginning its slow, steady climb back to excellence. I didn't get revenge, I simply demanded justice for myself. But in doing so, I accidentally exposed my sister's entire house of cards to her new, very wealthy fiancé, who not only broke off the engagement, but used his influence to make sure she was thoroughly investigated for the mortgage fraud. I didn't have to break my family's heart by sending her to jail. She did it to herself. And that, I realized, was a kind of poetic justice that no judge could ever deliver. If you think everyone deserves to be protected from those closest to them, then hit that like button.
And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of secrets, survival, and poetic justice.